Hello, my friends. Katie Day with the Move Me to Texas team here with another episode of the Real Advice podcast. I'm excited to welcome a friend to the podcast today that is an absolute powerhouse agent in the Maryland area and just absolutely crushes it on listings and team building and just all kinds of stuff. So I'm excited to dig in. I've got a list of topics that I wanted to cover. When we first started talking about this, she let me know that there's just so much that we're going to cover today. So I am super excited. Please join me in welcoming Meredith Fogle. What's going on? How are you today?
I'm great, Katie. Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun to get to be a guest on your podcast.
I'm excited to dig in. So for those that may not know you, tell us a little bit about how you got into real estate and kind of got to where you are today.
Yeah. So Meredith Fogle, and I am the team leader for the Meredith Fogle Real Estate Team and sort of recent founder of a company called the List Realty.
Yep.
We serve Maryland, DC, and Virginia. And coming up on 30 years in real estate, started way back in the 90s as a way of kind of, I think, melding what I felt were like my natural talents for sales, for presentation, for communication, and a lot of just the kind of like creative things that I loved to do. It felt like a good platform combining all of those things.
Yeah.
Got into real estate after buying my first house and was kind of inspired by who helped me as my buyer's agent then, who turned out to be the president of our local board organization many, many years later, but just a gracious, lovely human being who, unbeknownst to me, I was like serious low man on the totem pole in terms of her price point, but I never knew it. I mean, she made me feel as important as the multi-million-dollar clients that she was also working with.
Yeah.
So I always sort of like took that as a lesson for how to treat people. And, from her inspiration to me getting my license, to me sitting in my basement of my first townhouse, that townhouse she helped me buy, making, I can't even tell you how many hundreds of cold calls till I broke open my first listing. And it kind of all went from there.
So two things that I think are huge in what you just said. The one is when you look back on it and you realize that you were buying the starter home, but you never felt like you were second rate or anything like that to her.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing she now looking at it, you're like, oh man, like that was such a small transaction compared to what you normally sell. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
And everyone should be taking note of that and, hopefully making their clients feel that way. The second part is you said that you were making hundreds of calls in your basement for your first listing. So did you, when you first got into real estate, just jump in to try to get listings, or what was kind of your, mode of business back then?
I did. I think I realized pretty early on that, there was that old saw you always heard, you have to list to last. And although I didn't really know what it meant, it like would spin around in my mind and I believed it. So I thought, if I could get a listing, I did fundamentally understand that a listing would attract buyers. And having had a background in retail management from the time I was, in college working in retail until the time I went into real estate, essentially, I always thought about the fact that in retail, you have a storefront that attracts buyers. So what's your storefront in real estate? It's the listing, right?
Yeah.
If we that's not a product we're really selling. It's a storefront that is inventory supplied by somebody else, our seller. But that's how we attract our consumer, is by having that storefront without having a shingle to put up or any kind of a real store or a brick and mortar office, which was always in my vision. That was it then. So I kind of got that concept.
Well, and you've got the brick and mortar, right? So
yeah, we do now. But that was a long time.
Full circle.
Yeah.
No, I think that's huge. I think that being so focused from the beginning is important. And I know I certainly wasn't. I was just like, whatever I can do to make money. I was, you cover a pretty wide geographic area, which now, I know that you specifically focus in and you have team members and things like that. So it's a little bit different. But I mean, I was driving, the equivalent for you of like from, Western Maryland to DC to Virginia, back, and just all over the place, right? It was just like wherever I could meet someone that wanted to rent or buy or do whatever, I was going, because I was just like I've just got to talk to as many people, meet with as many people. And I wish I would have been more focused on listings in the beginning, because it definitely would have been more organized.
But you did okay for yourself, as it turns out. So,
It worked
it
out.
works.
And I think
It does.
that's kind of a good segue to the team thing, right? Because I know you
Mhm,
have your brokerage, but you also have a team, right?
mhm,
And you know, for me, I think it's in growing the team and in hiring team members and training them. It's like I want to tell you all the things that I did wrong, right, so that you can do them right from the beginning. What has been your kind of guiding principles and thoughts when training your team?
mm. It's interesting that you bring that up about wanting to tell all the things that you did wrong. What I've realized is having team members, whether they're transfers from another brokerage or brand new agents, newly licensed, it's kind of like raising kids, where you want to say to your kids, listen to the story I have, listen to all the stuff I did wrong. Don't make my mistakes. You have
Yeah,
to let them make their mistakes. You don't learn as a human being
yeah,
unless you experience the lesson most of the time. And as painful as it is to watch, and you certainly want to you want to let your toddler fall off a curb, not off a building. Kind of like you want to let your clients or your team members rather, make a small mistake, and
yeah,
therefore you're guiding them through and you're really babysitting what they're doing, never letting them be on the precipice of that building. You want to make sure that you're teaching them the right way. So in a limited way, you're giving them freedom and autonomy, but also keeping the protection of your clients, which is our top duty, at
yeah,
the forefront of your mind at all times. So that's one thing, is letting them make limited mistakes so that they learn. And
yeah,
also applying the skills. I mean, that's a thing that I feel like a lot of people who transfer to me come to me telling the story of either they never really got the opportunity to use what they were learning, or they never really felt mentored or guided the right way,
yeah,
or they were given leads, but then the leads really went to like the team manager, and the team manager just took the lead after they had kind of converted it. So I think allowing the team member to apply what they're learning, I believe in what I call a three-tiered learning cycle. So one is self-guided, two is instruction or classroom taught, and three is applied skill. And the applied
yeah.
skill is really where it hits home. So giving them the opportunity to apply that skill is pretty huge.
Well, and it's tough, right? Because it's like in teaching, right? Like there is a lot of like you've got to do it in order to learn it,
Hmm.
especially in real estate. And I think what the problem is, or what the difficulty is like no transaction's ever the same, right? I mean, I'm sure even in 30 years in the business, like you still hit situations where you're like, huh,
Absolutely.
let's think about this for a minute, right? It's
Yeah.
not just like task oriented A, B, C, D. Sometimes it goes A, B, and then it skips to, J or something, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, which is such
so
a fun part of the business too, I think. I love that we get to learn something new. Sometimes fun, sometimes not so fun,
yeah,
but
sometimes I
it's
love it, sometimes
never
I hate
the
it.
same. Yeah, sometimes
Yeah,
devastating, sometimes awesome. But yeah, but I mean it really is like it's a lifetime learning experience. And I think
yeah,
when you see it that way, as an opportunity to improve your skill and yourself as a person, every time you hit what feels like a challenge, it's like incredibly rewarding.
for sure. So I know one thing that you're known for is farming, right? And being very community based.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I think that ties a lot into, obviously focusing on listings and things like that, and just being an anchor of the community, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
people, when you're out in your area, people are like, "Oh, hey, what's going on? How are you?"
Yeah.
Kentlands, right? That's where you live, right? Or
I
where you
do.
farm.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um, like I know that because I see your market updates. I see
Oh,
your,
thank
news
you.
updates. I see these different things of like, "Hey, this new shop opened up. What do you guys think?"
Yeah.
And yeah. So, what advice would you give to someone if they were looking to kind of break into a neighborhood? Like, the coaches always give you, hey, you need to calculate these percentages and find the dominant
Mhm,
listing agent and see, what the addressable market is and all of these things. Did you do all of that, or
mhm.
were you just like, I live here and I'm going to be the person?
Both. So I do all of that, and that was actually from my book is where a lot of those calculations were originated. So I do think I think of it this way, you wanna think of it with your approach it with your head and with your heart. Your head is the numerical part. So that is there actual market share available in that geographic area to support your business goals? If there is, it makes sense to dive into that. If not, you can maybe have that as one farm and or another farm and adjoining farm, or a subsequent farm after you get started in that farm. So there is definitely a numerical piece of it. But I think no matter what the numbers show, unless you have a passion for the area that you are trying to concentrate in or gain market share in, you're
Yeah.
never really going to gain traction. Perfect example is there was a would-be geo farmer here who was a competitor of mine for a while. And this agent, would kind of say denigrating things sometimes at farm area events. Didn't live
Yeah.
here, didn't really feel a sense of belonging, but saw this as a lucrative opportunity, I think, and therefore kind of pretended, like came in and sponsored some events and, didn't really want to be here. And
Yeah.
people saw that, and it
Mhm.
diminished that person's ability to gain traction. So if you feel yourself like not really feeling it for a particular area you're looking at, look somewhere else. It's not for you. And a farm can be somewhere you live. It's much easier if you live in the
Yeah.
area that you're going to work in, but it could also be somewhere you have lived, somewhere you aspire to live, or a similar area to a farm or geographic area that you've already sort of begun to concentrate in. So there are different ways of getting into a farm and evaluating whether it's right for you.
Well, and I think that's huge of the heart piece, right? And obviously, if you live there and you're already involved in that community, it makes it very easy for you to then concentrate your marketing efforts and sponsorships of things and, just sharing information about the community because you're already there and
Yeah.
you enjoy it and you love it and like you do want
Yeah.
to share, right? That's what I've
Mhm.
always found about communities I live in. I love highlighting the businesses, the business owners, right? Because it's my community, they're my people.
Yeah,
So
just
I,
being
you
out
know,
and about. I mean, it makes it a natural place of opportunity for you when you go to the grocery store or when you go get your coffee or whatever. You're interacting and seeing people, and the more interaction person to person you can have, the better your chances of building that trust and, having people want to work with you.
Well, and so what are some things that you do in your farm as far as like either client events or events that generate just community outreach, right? Because I would
Yeah.
say to some extent they are marketing, right? Because you're putting your name
Mhm.
out there and you're the sponsor of it, or you're hosting it. So what are some events that you think just crush it, for you to get face to face with people?
Yeah, well, I'm going to take you back to sort of like the origins of how I got involved in the community here and why I did it. One was because I kind of wanted to. I was a
Yeah,
almost new mom at the time, and when my kids age, I wanted to be involved with them and have an excuse, kind of like to be in their space a little bit. And I also wanted to give back. I just, I have like an altruistic bone in my body, so I started to. I remember my retired mentor said to me, if you can be in charge of something, people will recognize you as having leadership skills that they might
yeah,
not have, and therefore will put you in a position of hierarchy for things that need a big lift, like selling a house. And I was like, okay, how can I do that? So I got involved in the PTA. That was super early
okay,
days in my kids' school. Did that for years. And then I saw a need for what has now become STEM night, which was science and invention night at the
yep,
time. And being a nerdy science person and, with a love of biology, I was like, oh, this is one thing I'm going to do. So we started science and invention night. I'm also a theater girl. So the other side of me is the creative performer side. I know I have all kinds of weird stuff. But I also wanted to start a variety show at the school. So we had the variety show, and it was great because they were opposite ends of the school year. So I didn't have to do
yeah,
like, heavy lifting at all the same time. So we had science and invention night and then variety show. And what was cool about that is I snuck my little, Brian Buffini ask, by the way, if you know anyone thinking
yeah,
about buying or selling a house, the greatest compliment I could receive is a referral from someone like you. And that was on the tagline of every email that went out back in the day. We didn't have like giant listservs or anything like that. It was just emails going out to people.
yeah,
So I was subtly positioning myself and doing it strategically as well, as a real estate agent, gaining that resonance with the people that I was able to get contact information for that I wouldn't have had otherwise, who were involved in these different events. And I loved doing it. So it was kind of like
yeah.
a project, a passion project, and also a way of gaining business. And then I would be at the events, and everybody loves to talk about real estate, of course. So they'd come up to me and they're like, I probably don't want to talk shop, but I'm like, oh my gosh, nothing else I'd rather talk about
Oh,
until
fine, let's
like, all
go.
right, darn, I guess. And then so we talk about. I don't even know how many opportunities from those things. So that then evolved into more things there. But the other thing that I did is I started, and this is, I got a little intro to BNI
Yeah.
early on in my career and quickly realized it was not for me. Just it was a level of commitment that I just thought I could be doing other also. And but what I did want to do is do something to help the business community here in the neighborhood. So I started, this was way back when, what was called the Kentlands Lakelands Business Group. And we met in the Carriage House, which is one of our little city facilities, once a week. And we would do, it was like BNI Light. So we would do like a like go rid of each business, and then one person would get up and present. There was no requirement for trading referrals. We evolved that to going out and having lunch. And then eventually, when I got really, really busy and we had like a real board and everything, it got adopted by the Kentlands, Lakelands, what did they call it? Downtown Partnership. And it became like a really big thing with city officials and people coming in and being part of it. And, has a life of its own now. So that was really cool, but it still exists online as a Facebook group. And the trust that was built in those relationships has had ripple effect all of the years. So I've been given lots of opportunities by other city officials and people who are entrepreneurs from that original group to be involved in things that I wouldn't have otherwise. So again, it was like a give back kind of a thing, but led to great things that I couldn't have foreseen. Then I was tapped to serve on the board of our foundation, the Kentlands Community Foundation, which is the philanthropic branch of the governing bodies here in the Kentlands. I'm moving into the chair position in June, and that I have loved as well. That's a total labor of love. It is, our mission is culture, new urbanism, and volunteerism here in the community. So another great way to give back, get out in front of people. And through that organization, I run the Kentlands Community Players, which is a local community theater organization. Again, that's like my real just plain labor of love. I've also run the swim team. I just gave that up as I'm moving in. I knew I had limited bandwidth to do both things. And anyway, I pretty much aged out of that. I have one kid left on the swim team, and she's a freshman in high school now. And for events, we do two big ones. So we do Oktoberfest, which is the big city of Gaithersburg October celebration. It's like a German beer and pretzel festival, but really like a vendor kind of fair. And we do it right in front of our office. Tons of giveaways. There's a really fun,
Nice.
feel good give back day. And then a neighborhood chili cook off. So that's
Ooh.
all my stuff.
When's the chili cook-off?
We do that in the fall also, but I think
Okay.
we're going to move it to spring because that's two kind of big things right
Yeah.
in the same kind of time frame. But that was one that we did as like a little, back before I even moved into Kentlands, as a
Yeah.
neighborhood event that I totally R&D'd from my aunt, who did it in her neighborhood in Virginia for years and years. And what's cool about that is other people bring the food. So,
Yeah.
you're like hosting a meal, but people bring the food. You're doing the prizes, the venue, the DJ, the
Yeah.
drinks, that kind of stuff. But super fun. And then the HOA got involved in it and wanted to take it on
Nice.
as an HOA event. So I do it in partnership with the HOA now.
That could be a good, like, this time of year thing, right? When it's, like,
Yes.
just starting to warm up, so it's not
Yeah.
like you're eating chili in, like, 90-degree
July.
weather, but it's
Right.
like, yeah, like
Yeah.
a early spring,
Yeah.
thaw out type thing.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
I think the common theme that I'm hearing from you, other than the complete opposite ends of the spectrum of your interests,
Yeah.
being like arts and then sciences, which is crazy to me. But I think the other theme that I'm hearing is just seeing what you can do to help others and
Mm,
prop up others' businesses, right? And that's like for
yeah.
all of the things you were saying. You're like, I wanted to give back to the schools. I wanted to give back, to my local community. So I made this group to highlight other businesses, right, and highlight other
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
And all of it seems to come back to you, right, when you have others in mind. So I think that's a common
Yes.
theme of everything you're saying, which I think is really important because a lot of times agents, especially when they're first starting out, come in very self-serving, right? And it's like, oh, well, I'm going to call Meredith to see how things are going so she can send me business, right? And if I did that, you're going to be
Yeah.
like, oh, geez, like that's cool. Thanks, Katie. But if I call you and I'm like, well, how can I help your business, right? The conversation's very different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just believe in all of that. What you put out there comes back to you. I've seen it
Yeah,
over and over again in so many different examples that
for sure.
that's a truth I live for sure.
Definitely. So I think there's a lot of good information there and a lot of different things that people can do to kind of get involved in their communities if they're not already, or to step up their game, right? If they're involved, but obviously, I mean, you're doing a ton. I'm impressed by that, and obviously, being a new mom, I'm like, geez, now I've got to figure out what things I can get involved in. So
Yeah, you
love
get so
it.
many opportunities as a new mom. It's fun. It'll be fun.
Yeah. For sure. As far as the team, you guys cover DC, Maryland, Virginia, the DMV area, for those that don't know. What would you say, or what advice would you give to someone if they were just starting out their team? We were talking about this earlier, like I I feel like no one really has a smooth path in starting a team. There's a lot of things that you think like, oh, well, Meredith had that issue, but I won't, so I'm going to do it that way. And then you have the same issue or the same problem or challenge. What advice would you give to someone of like, hey, here's one thing that I did that like you definitely shouldn't do, or here's one thing that like you should focus on as you're starting and growing your team?
Man, there's so many things that I did do that you should not do. That would take up a whole other podcast. But I think one of the big lessons that I have learned to sort of like break through the noise of all of the advice that we get, and sometimes like
Yeah.
being hard on ourselves and trying to like quickly rectify things that didn't go right, is to get clear on who you are as a person and as a company first,
Yeah.
to have a really clear vision for what you want to achieve, what your big goal is. There's a great book called Who Not How. Oh my gosh, I'm going to blank out on the guy's name. Shoot. Dan Sullivan, I think is the guy's name, the author. Um, but there's also a great book called Good to Great. And
Yep.
those two books are actually similar in some ways. Who Not How is kind of like almost like the who piece of the who to get on the piece of that Good to Great. But when you can figure out what your passion is, what your goal is, and combine that with your economic driver, then you figure out everything else kind of falls into place. And then the next piece is get the right who's on the bus,
Yep.
starting with your leadership. If you ever read The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, you know that Gary Keller tells you that you should be bringing on an assistant before you bring on a buyer's agent. I did that backwards. I brought on a buyer's
Sa-
agent first.
Same,
And did you
same,
do that?
same. Of
Would you
course.
change
I
it
thought I
or
knew
would you
better
not?
than my coach. Um, Everything worked out in the way that it should. The
Yeah.
the buyer's agent is now her own team lead, and things like that. But even when she started her team, when she left mine, there were things that I told her. I was like, "Hey, don't do this," and it's like they've got to make their own mistakes, And then,
Yeah.
a year later, she's like, you were right." I'm like, I know. So,
Tried
anyways,
to
yeah,
tell you. Yep. Yep. Okay. So yeah, and same thing. I don't know that I would have changed it. I get the theory and the logic behind what Gary says in the book. But I do think the major piece is getting the right who on first. And then when
yeah,
the who buys into your vision and you can clearly articulate what the goal is, that makes a big difference. And that takes a big chunk of frustration and obligation off of the leader, because you're putting a talented person in place who's going to take their piece of the job within that vision and just run with it. And then the second piece is to concentrate on the result. So that's the thing. That's like maybe the big thing I think I did and maybe still do wrong from time to time is I kind of go, okay, the result didn't happen. So here's all the things that we did wrong that made the result not happen. So let's fix this, and put a whole new system in place and plug this in. And in reality, and you kind of hit on this earlier, Katie, there's really not one right way to do real estate. There are
yeah,
lots of right ways to be successful in real estate. There are some tried and true things that most new agents can plug into to get some quick productivity and some traction that makes them able to apply the skills that they're learning. But the result is really what matters. And as long as the way the result is being achieved is aligned with your values, your vision, your mission for your company, there's lots of different ways to get to productivity in real estate.
yeah. The problem is my way is the right way, and then there are other ways. No, I'm
I hear
kidding.
you.
I'm kidding.
I
That's
hear you. Oh my God, you and me both. I get it.
um
100%. Yes.
the problem with most real estate agents, and I'm kidding when I say that because there are other ways that could potentially be right. I'm not saying they are right, but they could potentially be right, but that most real estate agents are such drivers that it's like it's my way or no way.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the thing is when you transition from real estate agent to real estate team lead, you've got to realize that it's not always going to be your way, right? There could be
Yeah.
other ways that things could be done, and being a good enough leader to recognize the people that can help you to do more, right? And do things maybe slightly different, but still get the same end result. And that's
Yep.
something I think that takes a while to get to, even with previous management
Yes.
experience and previous, sales experience and just previous work experience. Like, I feel like every team leader has that kind of misstep in the beginning, right? Of trying to figure out
Yeah.
how to manage that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I do believe a culture of discipline is important though. And I think that's another
Yeah.
thing, even though within that right way, there's got to be some fundamental disciplines in place in
Yeah.
order to achieve the result you're looking for.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that kind of piggybacking off of that for us was like figuring out what obviously our value prop was, but then figuring out what our agent avatar was, right? Because
Mm,
I think we've
mhm.
been through a lot of like different, people and different hiring processes. And once we kind of made a little bit longer of a hiring process and implemented more things into it, we realized we were able to better test that out, because everyone in an interview says that they love, people, they love showing homes and they're ready to work hard, right?
Yep.
And then when you
Yep.
really put them to the test, that's not always the case. So if you can figure that
Exactly.
out earlier, I think that helps to reduce the turnover and stuff like that.
100%. I love your thought on the slower hiring process and maybe
Yeah.
even do you have people like between you? Do you have people who interview first and then you're like farther along
So
in
we've
the
got
process?
we've got a little bit of both, so when we have someone in an ops role, they normally will do those initial calls. But honestly,
Mhm.
lately we've had a lot of our team members bringing people to the
Mm.
team, right? And so
Mhm.
what'll happen is, like, an agent will be looking out at open houses, or it's a friend of a friend of a friend or their friend or whatever. So they'll bring
Mhm.
them to the team. And so we do basically an initial interview, whether that's with an agent on the team or whatever, just kind of that kind of casual conversation.
Mhm.
And then they come to a team meeting. And then we do actually a 3-week onboarding
Mm.
process where
Mhm.
it's like a training program and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
during that time, a lot of people will self-select out, because it's like you have a couple hours of online training, some hours of classroom, in Zoom or in
Mhm.
person. And then there's like homework, right? Like, you have to do the CMA, you have to write this email, you have to whatever, and that kind of tests their work ethic.
Yeah.
Um, and so then at the end of their 3 weeks, we come to a mutual decision on if being on the team is the right fit or not. And then they have a 60-day probationary period. And so that's kind of our slowing things down, because before it'd be
Mhm.
like, Meredith, you want to be a real estate agent? All right, let's go. And the
Mhm.
amount of time we would put into training, and then you decide you don't want to be on the team, or we decide it's not a good fit. We're like, crap, like, we just spent months with you pouring
Yeah.
in, and
Yeah.
you left. So the onboarding in groups was key, and then just having some extra steps along the way, and things like that, I think were helpful for us.
Love
To
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it speaks so
yeah.
well of you and your team that you've got your team members out there looking for people and bringing people to you. That's awesome. Nicely done.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been cool to see kind of everyone want to continue to build the culture. I think that's
Mhm.
the entire want to have a beer with them type thing, right? And
Yes,
so
yes.
if you don't feel that way about your team members, then maybe they're not the right fit. If you
Right.
don't want to go have a beer with them, or a coffee, or
So
whatever
true.
whatever your drink of choice is.
Right.
Um, Man, I've got a lot of things that I have here as far as bullet points from what you're saying. I appreciate all of your knowledge. So one thing that we didn't touch on, and we're running short on time, but one thing we didn't touch on was listings and kind of where you are today as far as like,
Mm,
listings and cultivating those. And so obviously some of that's the farm, some of that's community events. What would you say is
mhm.
your biggest, like, um, lead pillar or lead source for listings today? If you had to go get a
For me
listing, where would it be? Yeah, where would it
yeah,
be
me
from?
personally, it's the farm. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
kinda known as the Kentlands, Lakeland's go-to person, so if someone has
Yeah.
a house to sell, they typically will call me and at least give me a shot, if not,
Yeah.
just sign with me. Also doing some things with, buyer looking letters, that's been a big one. Door knocking, that's been a big one for us as a team. We have VAs who work for us to unlock listing opportunities, so lots of different
Yeah.
stuff, but for me personally, it is the farm.
The farm. And I feel like even when you dug in deeper on that, it's a lot of old school and new school stuff, right? Like
Mhm.
the callings old school-ish, right? But then like, you have VAs that are assisting with that. You've got
Mhm.
a lot of different things. So yeah, that's I love it. I love and
Yeah,
I love being so, hyper local as well.
yeah, yeah, that's
All
been
right.
big for us.
Two last questions. First one is, if you had to recommend a book to someone to read, what would it be?
Well, if you haven't really started digging deep on reading, Think and Grow Rich, go to that one. That's Napoleon Hill. The Slight Edge is another really, really good one. I know you asked for one. If you are a team leader, go to Good to Great, probably.
Okay. And then you have a book too. I'm surprised that wasn't the first one you
Yeah.
went to.
Oh,
What's your book, and where could people
it's
find it?
Farming for Real Estate Agents is the name of that book, and it's anywhere books are sold. You can find it. It's on Audible as well. And it's like a blueprint for if you want to be a geographic farmer, for choosing, cultivating, dominating your farm, and even one day selling it if you want to do that.
Did you ever think when you got into real estate, when you heard people talking about farms, that they were actually talking about literal farms?
Oh
Did you ever
yeah,
think
yeah.
that,
At
or
the
did you
very
think that
beginning,
like,
I was like, what? And then, yeah, I now looking back, I probably and I might actually re-release it as geofarming because geofarming has become such a buzzword.
yeah,
But it's yeah, I might. I don't know. Got other stuff I want to do too.
yeah, add it to the list of things
Right,
that you
right.
want to get done, kind of thing.
Yes.
Um, Fantastic. All right, last question. It's hard hitting, so if take as much time as you need on this one. If it were your last meal on earth, what would you be eating? It can be homemade, it could be at a restaurant.
Man, that's a tough one. I'm probably gonna go, this is again very hyper local, but with Maryland blue crabs. I'd be on the bay at a restaurant overlooking the bay, cracking open those. For those who eat like big king crabs or from the West Coast, you think our crabs are like little tiny, you know, portions, and they are. And there's a lot of work involved in eating them, but man, it just brings up all the things that are Maryland and feel like home. So that'd probably be it.
No,
Lots of
that's a
Old
very
Bay.
Maryland. No, of
Yes.
course, that's a very Maryland answer. I mean, the
Yeah.
same thing could be said. I mean, I grew up in Maryland, but the same thing could be said about crawfish here in Texas and in the Gulf Coast, right? It's just like
Yeah.
it's so much work, and you get out, a little piece of meat. But
It
I
feels
think
so
it's more
worth it.
so. It is worth it, but it's also like, the company, you're drinking a
Yes.
beer or two, you're,
Right.
just kind of hanging out. But
Right.
then like, your lips are burning, you can't touch your eyes because, they're covered in seasoning. So I feel ya.
Yes. Yes.
Crawfish down here have been
Exactly.
the crab equivalent for me, being in
That's awesome.
Texas. So I
Ooh, I
feel
gotta
you
try
there.
that.
So two things: if someone doesn't already follow you on social media, where's the best place for them to find you?
Instagram, we're at the List Realty or Meredith Fogle Team. Facebook, we're all over Facebook as well. Twitter, LinkedIn, all the places.
Awesome. And I know you have a podcast. If someone wanted to listen to that, where would they find it? On all podcasting
So You Want
platforms,
to Be
but
a Real Estate Agent is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, anywhere you get in your podcasts. You'll find that as
perfect.
well.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate all of the knowledge. I've got a bunch of notes. I'm sure everyone that listening does as well. And wish you nothing but the best. Can't wait
You
till
too.
we see each other here
Yes.
soon.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, wish you the
Thank you
best of
so much,
luck.
Katie. This has been so much fun.
Awesome. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.